My name is Jeffrey Brown, and I'm putting this video together for the ratepayers of Tauranga so that they can perhaps have some understanding as to how a large percentage of the issues which now plague Tauranga City Council have come about. I'm going to call this video series Architected Outcomes because from my point of view there was no other outcome based on the behaviour of various individuals at Tauranga City Council, and the focus of this video will largely be on Tauranga City Council during Garry Poole's tenure, but we'll sort of cover a few other areas just prior to that when Lee Orton was the temporary CEO in charge of Tauranga City Council. So to provide some context in terms of where I'm coming from, I, up until 2014, was a staff member at Tauranga City Council in the IT department for 18 years. And in 2014, I left the council. Now, prior to my departure, another person had left the council, and I would characterise their departure as being related to a poor workplace under Garry Poole, and also a lack of integrity. From my point of view, I can only tell you that my departure was redundancy, and I can only say that and can't go any further because of employment confidentiality requested by Tauranga City Council. Now, after my departure in 2014, I made a protected disclosure to the Tauranga City Council, and for those of you who are not familiar with the protected disclosure, it essentially allows a staff member to complain about serious wrongdoing. The serious wrongdoing I complained about was what I would roughly call financial dodginess and a lack of integrity, and that was sent into the Tauranga City Council and comprised about 112 pages. Now, I don't know who was the lead investigator in that protected disclosure and providing a response, but I know that one Jeremy Boaz was involved in that, and the end result was a one-page response which essentially said there was no wrongdoing discovered as a result of their investigation, the Tauranga City Council's investigation into itself. As a result of that, I then escalated it to the Ombudsman Peter Boshier, and Peter Boshier won't generally receive a protected disclosure unless the entity you're complaining about has been contacted first. So when he received it, he essentially, being a past judge, and this will just be opinion of mine, he essentially, like a lot of judges, eliminated his workload as much as possible. The first thing he did is identify that there was a financial issue to the protected disclosure. So he removed that and sent that to the Office of the Auditor-General for being dealt with. The next thing he did is he then looked at the integrity issues, and given the integrity issues under the Local Government Act can only relate to people, in other words the staff, CEO and councillors, he then considered that that was an issue which he didn't need to deal with because it is an issue that relates to staff and CEO, etc., and therefore it is covered already in New Zealand legislation under employment law. So he then elected to take the exit off-ramp, which essentially said if there is another avenue that can be pursued, then there is no requirement for the Ombudsman to investigate a protected disclosure. So that basically put the issue back into the employment law arena, and if any of you have had any experience in that, it sort of is a low integrity arena by and large in operation. I say that, and we'll just digress for a moment here, I say that because in New Zealand you essentially have criminal law which works on beyond reasonable doubt. You then have civil matters which work on the balance of probability. You then have various injunctions and things which tend to operate on the balance of convenience. And the employment legislation arena, while it should be working on the balance of probability, It has various clauses in it, in particular section 149 to do with confidentiality and other things, which essentially change that environment, in my opinion. It is no longer on the balance of probability. I, and this is my term, call it on allowable sickness. So essentially Peter Boshier put me back into the arena, which by my definition is an allowable sickness, in order to address an integrity issue. So given that Peter Boshier had taken the off-ramp on that one, the matter then got escalated to the State Services Commissioner, Peter Hughes, and one Andrew Gain responded to me and essentially said that the State Services Commission does not have as its job to oversee local councils, and essentially avoided dealing with the protected disclosure. So after that, I contacted the Office of the Auditor-General, and they seemed to be confused as to whether or not they actually had anything to investigate from the Ombudsman Peter Boshier, and they'd had it for approximately 6 months. And 2 weeks later, after I contacted them, and they didn't seem to have any details about anything they were investigating, I got a letter back from the Office of the Auditor-General basically saying they're not going to investigate any further. So that was in approximately June 2017, and this whole process had started in 2015. The Ombudsman had taken approximately 5 months to respond, and of course that was on top of the time that Tauranga City Council took to respond, because I had to wait for their response. And then when that was passed on to the State Services Commissioner, that essentially took probably about a month and a half before they came back and said they weren't going to do anything. So at that point I went to Members of Parliament, and one of the first people I contacted was none other than Anne Tolleys, the MP for the East Coast. She was also the Minister of Local Government, which is why I contacted her. And what we'll now do is, as the first analysis into this, have a little bit of a look at her response. So what we have here is a response back from Anne Tolleys to me on the 25th of September 2015, and a bit like Peter Boshier, she has elected to take what, in my view, are integrity-related issues that were violated under the Local Government Act, and not to do anything. Now, there's another intervening letter, but this is sort of I think the final letter I sent to her on the 3rd of October, and what I've stated to her, that your conclusion that it is an employment matter is nothing more than a categorisation that is completely at odds with the purpose of the letter. This characterisation is done on the basis that it can then be put into the basket labelled "don't need to deal with it." This simplification does nothing to advance the operation of local councils towards the future needs of their communities. The redactions that you see here are done so as to meet the various employment confidentiality requirements that the council has required of me. Now I list here the non-action will mean the following, and I list all of the issues that are going to then arise, and I do that because in my view politicians can be a little bit slow on the uptake and not quite realise the ramifications of what's going to happen, and so I have laid out the ramifications here, and I state there that I trust your response to this letter will be more worthwhile than what I've received so far, as my crapometer is going off the scale. There was no further response to this, so the typical type of way that, in my view, politicians deal with something they really find too hard or too difficult to deal with, or just want to get back to their scone and tea. So what I'm going to do now is put down the issues that we know from the media and what I've told you against the list of issues I told Anne Tolleys would occur as a result of her non-action. So first up we've got the executive PAs doing work for Garry Poole, and what I'm going to do is put that under workplace sickness. We'll also put another one under CEO irresponsible, another one under personnel policy that's inconsistent with being a good employer, and another one under local councils don't need good and safe working conditions. The next one I'll do is to do with the culture, and if you have a look at one of my TCC sickness videos which are on YouTube, you'll see I cover off the culture survey and what the culture was like. So we'll have another bit of culture feedback that was known to all, put under council workplace sickness. Another one under councils don't need to be a good employer. Another one under personnel policy that's inconsistent with being a good employer. And another one that councils don't need good and safe working conditions. And you may recall one of the PAs left after only 2 weeks. Next up I'll do the Phoenix car park, and I'm going to put that under don't need good accountability or require accountability. That was where the 2.4 million got spent. And also local councils don't need to provide good quality to the ratepayers of the area. In the Max Peterson report, there was also mention of the Mount Surf Club and the sort of upgrade that happened there, so I'll put that under accountability. And then we'll move on to Coolin Park. This is where we had a whole lot of consultation done, which didn't really achieve anything. So it didn't require good accountability there, because I think $200,000 was spent. And also under here, don't need to provide good quality, we have nothing to show for it. Right, moving on to the Greerton roading, we've got poor accountability there because the traffic loading wasn't factored into the design. It's not meeting the needs of the community, certainly not now and going into the future, so we'll put that one on as well. And then last of all, for the Greerton roading changes, local councils not providing good quality. So then we've got general infrastructure needs which have been in the media, and the new commissioners are addressing that. I will put that one down there as you're not meeting the needs of the future. Okay, moving on to the Harrington Carpark building. There wasn't good accountability there in terms of the engineers and the liability insurance they had, so we'll pop that one there. And also not providing good quality to the community, we'll pop that one there as well. Now moving on to Bella Vista and the whole Mark Bell situation, which is where Mark Bell was used for inspections of Bella Vista when in fact he was also getting a house from them. So I'll put that down under 7, integrity. I think that's a monumental integrity issue. And then this next one we're going to have is, that was for using Mark Bell for that. Then the second thing is the decision not to raise Mark Bell as a conflict of interest, which I think creates a second order sickness in terms of integrity. Okay, we've got yet another integrity issue which was identified by Paul Heath in his report, which was the poor quality of the resource consent process related to Bella Vista. We then move on to the culture change that was supposed to happen, which I've already talked about, and that was into the blue. So that had a lack of integrity, which I have already covered off. It also is not causing the council to be a good employer, which is that one there. It's also causing the council to violate the requirement to be a good employer under the Local Government Act. And it's also not providing safe working conditions. And last of all, not meeting the needs of integrity in relation to the public interest. And last of all, things have degraded to the point where we actually now also don't have an effective relationship with the councillors, and we have commissioners in place. So I've put one across there. So the only one which hasn't got a whole lot of listed issues is number 1. Shared services are optional to the future positioning of the local council. And I would suggest that there is no certainty that that has actually been addressed. The fact there's been nothing in any newspapers means we can't make a decision either way, but I wouldn't be surprised if that was a problem as well. So good one, Anne Tolleys, for having that listed in my 3rd letter to you and doing nothing to actually try to fix this situation. So you'll see Anne Tolleys' involvement in all of this as the last line of resort, and perhaps the most powerful person who I contacted in that list of people, including the Ombudsman, State Services Commission, Peter Hughes and so on. And when she was contacted, she chose to do nothing. Now, from my point of view, she is an utter disappointment in terms of her performance when she was a minister. And in an early stage in assessing the situation in Tauranga, she had a wander down the CBD, and it was reported in Sun Live or something that she noticed the tumbleweed blowing around the CBD, Tauranga CBD, and the number of shops closed and the general demise of the CBD, and commented on the fact that there seems to have been a lot of hooey and not much doing. In the case of Anne Tolleys, it would be my opinion that she didn't even have much hooey, and there was absolutely zero doey. So it's wonderful, I find, when people comment on something where they have actually fulfilled their end of the bargain, which she could have done as Minister of Local Government, but when they haven't filled their end of the bargain and they go around and comment about other people, it really has a very hollow ring to it. It is hypocrisy at its best. Anyway, I'll leave you with that thought and disseminate some further information and video too for you.